when you're reading the Hebrew, or when you're reading the Bible, the different verses in the Bible, and you start to go into places where in the Bible there are foreign words. Sometimes you come across words that you know is not English. And a lot of the words we say today, when we're speaking, we say them a certain way. But when we go into the Hebrew, you get the pronunciation of the way it's supposed to sound, and then you realize what that word means. Like, for instance, in English, we say Melchizedek. Melchizedek. When Abraham met Melchizedek in Genesis chapter 14. The name in Hebrew is Melech Chazedek, or Melech Sodak. Now, a lot of people who know, I received a new name years ago. I was born Rodney, but I received a new name when I was 22. Most people that know me a little bit closer know me. You probably hear some people calling me Doc. It's short for Dakel.
Say it again.
Dakel.
Dakel.
Dakel. D-O-Q, not D-O-C. D-O-Q-E-L. Doc L. What it's short for is Zadok Elohim, or Zadok Elah, meaning all God is righteous, or righteous God. That's what the name means. And in many of the places in the Bible, you're going to find a lot of the names, a lot of places, words are going to a lot of times have something to do in the name. You're going to find God somewhere in that name. And that had a lot to do with some things back in that time with the naming ceremony, and also the naming of places, like Bethel. Bethel means, it's actually in Hebrew, it's Beit El, meaning Beit is house, El is God, house of God, Bethel. We just say Bethel, but it's Beit El. But just like Melchizedek, Melech HaZedek, that means Melech. When you say Melech, you're saying king or angel or even messenger. That one word, Melech, M-E-L-E-K, in English it'd be M-E-L-E-K, Melech. It's used when you say angel, it's used when you say king, and it's used when you say messenger. All of them mean the same. And the reason, if you look at what a king is, just like an angel would come down with a message or something, bringing something from God to the people or to a person. So that's a melech, or sometimes you might hear it pronounced malach, but melech, malach, same thing. So a king on the throne would represent the same thing. Like David was a melech because he was a messenger in a sense. That's what a prophet or a king, same thing. They carry that title, melech. When we talk about the bishop being the angel of this house, he's the melech of this house. That's the messenger, the king, and the angel.
The melech.
Melech. That's right.
The melech.
Melech. And that's the title for a king. Like I say, and when you go throughout the scripture, so Melchizedek was actually, his name Melchizedek is king of righteousness. Melech Zadok, king of Melech righteousness. Zadok, or Zedek Zadok. So Melech HaZedek was his name, and that's why he was called the king of, or angel of righteousness. Let me get another.
Give him another microphone.
But so when you're reading in the Bible, even in certain places in the Bible, you're going to come across words that are still in the Hebrew. There's one in particular when when Jesus is raising the little girl from the dead, and he goes in to her and he uses the word, and it's still in the print. If I can find the exact verse, but it's still in the print. He says, Talitha Kumi.
He did say that.
He's speaking Aramaic or Hebrew. That's basically the same thing. Hebrew. He's speaking and it's showing you right there, he didn't speak English. He spoke his natural language right there in Scripture. And that's one of the places where they actually keep it there. You know, Talitha Kumi, meaning arise, young woman or young girl. And so when we come across things like that, you'll begin to understand what is really being said. When you come across certain names, you'll begin to understand why they got that name and what their name means. You know, and then in all throughout the Bible, you know, you see Samuel, you see Ezekiel, all of that L on the end, Daniel, Michael, Michael, Gabriel. You know, there's a reason for that. And that's why God even said to Israel, I have surnamed you, Israel. Israel. So it's important to know when you're reading, you see it one way in English, but when you go into the Hebrew, it opens up a lot of things, a lot of meanings, and you know, give you a deeper understanding. Not so much as a different understanding, a deeper understanding than what we are seeing on face, you know, on the surface. So it's very important. I want. Does everybody have a letter chart?
I got one.
You got one? Well, I'm going to do first, I want to go through the letters real quick so you understand. What you're looking at, the alphabet we use today, we say alphabet, ABC. That comes from the Greek alpha, beta. You ever seen the Greek letters, like a lot of the fraternities use the Greek letters, you know, alpha, beta, kappa, lambda, nun, you know, those are the same letters. So it's alphabet in English, alpha, beta in Greek, and all that comes from this, which is the first two letters, aleph, bet. Aleph, bet, alpha, beta, alphabet. So you can trace the English language through time back all the way here. And I say the language, meaning letters, grammar, not so much as words. But we using the same letters. Same thing as Latin. Latin uses the same letters. All came up, even in Latin, Latin has a lot of Hebrew words inside of it. You know, they use the word L a lot and things like that. But so when you're reading the Hebrew, it kind of gives you an insight on some of the other languages, because a lot of the other languages were based around this. Now, it's not the oldest. There are older tongues, but this is the first one that was used like widely. Like even when you go back into the Bible, we were talking Wednesday about Genesis 10. Tower of Babel. At that time, everyone spoke one language, but that wasn't Hebrew at the time. The whole world spoke one language. We're going to get into that some other time too, because there's some things I want to talk about on that. But so it was only after God had came down and divided the tongues that the different tongues came into play with the different nations. But they were not different languages. They were different tongues, meaning dialects. So this is why Arabic and Hebrew and Aramaic and they all sound so much alike, because they come from one language, and they just got diverse, as people spread out, and those people would break up and they have two different dialects. Then it just got further and further out. So it all comes from one language, and you can see that also on the day of Pentecost. The day of Pentecost was proof of, those who were here Wednesday, we were talking about the Tower of Babel and how the languages were confounded at the Tower of Babel. Because remember, he was dispersing the nations amongst the gods of the nations. But then when the gods of the nations began to rebel, he started taking the nations back. And if you notice, the Lord, when he came in the flesh of the man Jesus, he was reclaiming it all back through him. There's a lot you do need to understand about the physical works that Jesus did. There's a spiritual side, but then there's a very serious physical side that had a lot to do going back to Genesis, and a lot to do going back to the tower. And this is why, if you notice, on the day of Pentecost, when the tongues of fire came down and rested upon them, those that spoke, everyone around them was able to hear again in their tongue, which is like a reversal of what happened at the Tower of Babel.
Yes, sir.
And it was only able to be done when the right one who was supposed to rule all the nations again came down, and that's the Son of God. He was able to send that spirit back into the world so that the tongue would be understood again, just like before the Tower of Babel. Very, very, very important. And it really ties that whole thing from the Tower of Babel to the day of Pentecost. So very important. You have to look at that in a very good. But we will, again, I just want to mention these things. We'll go into it deeper a little bit later. But keep that in mind and understand that's a very vital link to understand. Tower of Babel, day of Pentecost. Reversal of the confounding of the tongue. But we're going to go over this real quick. I want to go through the letters and so explain so you understand what you're looking at. Because I know it looks kind of strange. I got a different sheet than y'all, but same letters. Let me use one, y'all, so y'all know what I'm at. I know it looks rather strange, kind of very different. Any more? You got any more? Let me get one. The first letter is the letter Aleph. Now again, Hebrew is read always from right to left, from this side of the paper to this side. You never see it going this way, like that. As a matter of fact, all of the Semitic languages are written from right to left. Arabic, Egyptian, all of them. We kind of the backwards one. It's when you get up into the European nations that all that changed. But all of the Semitic languages are written from the right to the left. And it's so it's something to get used to when you read it. But it doesn't take, once you start doing it, you'll do it by habit, just like when you're reading English. So that you understand that. So this is why the order of the letters are going this way. So the first letter is Aleph. And that letter would be equivalent to A, when we say A, or Alpha. And the meaning of the letter is pretty much head, but not head as in like this head. Head is in the start of something, or the beginning of something, the very beginning of something. Right. and it has significant meanings. Every letter has a significant meaning. And so I was telling you, this is how they combine the letters to make words. Like the first letter, Aleph. The second letter is Beit. It makes the B sound. The B. The name of the letter is Beit, but it makes the B sound like the regular B. And the meaning of it is Beit, just like we were saying earlier, Beit El. The letter Beit means house. And is significant it's like a symbol of a house. So when you have the first letter, Aleph, the head, the beginning, the start, and Beit together, that's how the word Ab became father. You put Aleph, which is Ah, and Beit, which is Ba, together, and you have Ab. But it means Aleph is head, Beit is house, head of the house, father. Those are how Hebrew words were constructed. Every word had a meaning. They didn't just say stuff like we do today. We all got all kind of words in our language today, but everything that they said meant something. Everything. And their vocabulary was very limited at that time. So when you read something, it meant what it said and it said what it meant. Which is why it's so important. This is why in the beginning of the Hebrew classes, we were talking about why is it important to learn this language. Because if you're reading English translation and you don't know whether or not a particular translation is correct, the only absolute way to find out is for you yourself to go back to the Hebrew and look it up yourself. because regardless of all the councils that get together and do these translations and new, they got new versions of the Bible coming out all the time. Doesn't matter what they say, if what they have written does not say what Moses wrote, when he actually sat down and wrote it, or Solomon wrote it, then it's not the same. And the only way to truly know, now, of course, we trust him. You're going to put as much trust as you can. You want this to be all correct, but history shows, and even amongst themselves, when they meet and get together to decide to make a new version, they're discussing why the old version wasn't correct. So that lets you know they know themselves that it's about translation. Not saying that the Bible is wrong. Translation of the Bible could be wrong. Now, the different versions that they have, there's many. And I can tell you also there are over 5,000 manuscripts.
Yes.
When I say 5,000, I mean different. Each one different than the other.
Yes, sir.
And so that is why, and over a course of time, certain things, you hear the term lost in translation. That's how it happens, because when you translate from one language to another, a word can change a meaning. Just like that. And maybe subtly, but enough, just like when we were talking about Takano, and how Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, telling them how they sit in the seat of Moses. And in the Hebrew, it says, all which he says to do, that you do. But in the English, it says, all which they say, meaning pointing to the Pharisees. And it gives the reader the perception that Jesus is saying, do everything the Pharisees said to do. But in the Hebrew, it shows Jesus was saying, do everything Moses, Moses is talking, do everything Moses said to do. Things like that in translation can, one word from he to they, change that whole meaning of that entire paragraph. So it's important, and they know, and they understand that. That's why they always go back and try to check. One of the best translations that I would say is decent and good, very close to the original, is not the King James. The original King James first King James was an experiment, because the churches were warring at the time. You had the Church of England warring with Rome, and when King James took the throne, he did not want his kingdom and his subjects using the Roman Bible, the Catholic Bible. This is you got to read history to understand what's going on back then. But so King James commissioned, he got a council together, different scribes, and the problem was then very many scribes in the English kingdom did not know Hebrew that well. So they had to pull people from different places and try to come up with the best. And then also at that time, they only had some of the most recent copies. They didn't have the old text to use to translate from. So they began to, when the first one was done in 1611, it wasn't long after he came with the revised King James, because they had to go back and do it again. And they had even took some books out. You know about the Apocrypha. Well, in the first King James, the Apocrypha was in the King James. It was considered a part of the Bible at all times. But the only reason why they took it out, well, there's many reasons why they took it out. But one of the reasons why they said it's not as prophetic as the other books and things like that. So they were saying, well, we can make it a separate thing. And so you can go and buy an Apocrypha from the store with the other books in it. But they were once all in the Bible. And if you go to Rome now, the Catholic Church still has it in their Bible. Their Bible consists of 72, 74 books. So all this was done in translation. The American Standard is one of the better translations, because it was at that time, again, another separation. We were separating from England. And when they came over here, they wanted a Bible for this land. And that's when they took the time to get a more thorough translation. So it's a pretty good translation. But, like I say, the absolute 100 best translation is the Hebrew. Because when you go back to the Hebrew, there's no doubt in the translation. You don't have to filter through the Latin and Russian, German, and English, then all the way back down. You can go straight from Hebrew to English. So that's the importance of it. I'm gonna go. Let me keep going. The next letter is Gimel. Gimel. That letter makes the G sound. G, like G, not G as in Jeep, but G like G as in goat or go. Okay. The next letter is Dalet. Dalet. It's a D. Makes the D sound. The next letter is Hey. Makes the H, like in hot, or heat, or hold. The next letter is called, now the next letter is one of the trickier letters. There's only a few on here that you're going to notice that's really different from what you're normally used to. One of them is this first one here called the Vav, or you might hear some people saying Wav. And the reason for that is because the ancient Hebrew, certain letters that they pronounce, like the Wav was pronounced with a W sound, W. Later on, when the Masoretes, when they produced the Masoretic text, they added points and vowel signs to the text to give it the sound that they try to keep it as close to the ancient pronunciations as possible. So they changed it to Vav with a V. So that's why you hear some people say Yahweh or Yehovah, and some people will say Jehovah. Jehovah or Yahweh, Yahweh. Same thing, is just that you can tell who is who by their pronunciation. You can tell if they're Ashkenazi Jews and things like that, color their pronunciation. That's one of the trickier letters. And so it will make the V or the W sound. The one next to it is Zayin. Zayin. And it's a Z sound. The next one is Het. And it's pronounced Ch. Like when you say lock, it's like a K sound. Like Loch Ness Monster. It's that Het. It's kind of coming from the back of your throat. And that's one, and that's also it's a letter that we don't have any. We would use a CH, like a ch, or a CK, but it's really that sound. So yeah, when you hear something like I'm trying to think, some words, let me see, very few words. Barak or Baruch. Baruch means blessed. If I say Baruch ha, means bless her. So Baruch, not Baruch, but Baruch. So that letter is a very important letter in the Hebrew language. You hear it a lot though, but it's only certain words that actually gives it its pronunciation. The next one is Te, makes the T sound. The next one is Yod, makes a Y sound. Third line, next line, Kaf, makes that makes the K sound, like king or kite. The next one is Lamed, and from what the letter looks like, it reminds you of an L, and that's what it is. It makes the L sound. The next one is Mem, makes the M sound, M. The next one is Nun, makes the N sound, N. So you can see most of the letters are pretty much the same as English. It's only a few that's different. You had a question? All right, yeah. Let me explain that. Some of the letters, and you get an understanding of it too. Some of the letters, when they're written inside of a word or at the beginning of a word, it'll look this way. But if it shows up at the end of a word, it'll always look like that.
But it's not every letter. It's just right. The mem does that. The nun does that. That's why it's two nuns side by side. This one you will see at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word. But if it shows up at the very end of a word, it's going to always have that long tail. Always. That's a rule. It's a rule of grammar. But it's not every letter. Every letter doesn't do that. It's only the ones that you see. Those two there. Those two. The calf and calf. Right here. This is the form in the word. This is the form at the end of a word. So it's only a couple of them. I think it's only one more. Let me see. Yeah, the sade at the bottom. We'll get that one too. So it's like 4 letters that change form at the end of a word. Only at the end of a word. Nowhere else. So it's pretty easy to remember. But yeah, so that lets you know that's why you see the 2. But now, we'll get to it because we're coming up to it. The scene. Now the next letter is called samek. Makes the s sound. The next letter after that is ayin. And it's like the aleph. The aleph and the ayin. No, go ahead.
What's the difference in the meal at the end and the sun?
Right. Now, yeah, we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about it there. I'm going to go through them, then I'm going to go back because I'm going to show you there are some difficult. A lot of them do look the same. It takes practice to start noticing the difference. And it's not hard. After a while, you will see the difference. But a lot of them are they're kind of familiar to each other. But the aleph and that ayin, those 2 letters are actually they call the silent letters. And it pretty much works like the letter E does in English. Like if I say bit in English, B-I-T, and you hear the I in short I. But if I add an E on the end of that, it becomes bite, from bit to bite, just by adding an E. But that E is silent. You see what I'm saying? So it's the same thing in Hebrew. The aleph and the ayin kind of works that way. It can change the sound of a word, but you won't hear the ah from the aleph or the ah from the ayin. It's like it works sometimes like E. And so usually they're called the silent letters because they don't make their own sound like S and L and M. So you'll learn these, but I'm just mentioning it now. All these things you're gonna learn it, but I want to go over it and kind of get it in you first so you can understand what you're dealing with. But so because there are rules of grammar, just like English grammar, same thing, and it's basically the same. The English grammar is if you know any English grammar, it's not, you don't have to be I know we ain't trying to go back to school and go back to English class, but the grammar structure is basically the same. Is pretty much identical. So that's why I say it's not going to be hard to learn this. But so it's those little things you need to know. The next word is